Thank you for joining us, everybody. We're having more people joining, and that's great. Again, welcome to our TESL dialogue session for tonight. Over to our host, Melita Brickella.
Thank you, everyone, for coming to the dialogue. I see people are popping in, which is wonderful. Let's begin. Dr. Lynn Zimmerman's TEFL journey began in 1992 as a secondary TEFL Peace Corps volunteer in Poland. After that, she got a master's in library science, a master's in TESL, and a PhD in curriculum and teaching. She has taught educational foundations and TEFL as a teacher trainer at the undergraduate and graduate levels. She has been a Fulbright scholar in Poland, Belarus, and Moldova. She was an English language fellow in Albania and an English language specialist in Chad and Uzbekistan. Most recently, she served as a virtual specialist in Pakistan. Currently, she is a freelance online curriculum developer and online TEFL instruction. Welcome, Lynn.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tonight we'll have introductory questions of 2, conversations and discussions of 4 questions, and then we'll be going into our breakout rooms with an activity question. Once again, thank you for coming. Here's our first question. What is an independent learner? Lynn?
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So the most basic definition of an independent learner is somebody who takes responsibility for their own learning. They take initiative and they make good decisions on their own. Independent learners help students help themselves. They enhance their academic performance and they stay motivated. And you'll see that tonight we're going to talk about motivation a lot because that is really a key piece of this. Now, what I would like for you to do is to think of 1 or 2 words. Don't write a sentence, just 1 or 2 words in the chat. What do you think are some characteristics of independent learners? So just 1 or 2 words. If we so has everybody finished typing? We've got some really great words here, people. So well, I'm just going to start kind of at the top of the list, and I'm just going to look at them. So Sandra says that independent learners have confidence, and yes, they do. They have confidence that they can do what they need to do, and that they can do it right. And if they can't, they are confident they can find somebody who can help them. And so confidence is really a big word when we talk about independent learners. They're committed. And so, yeah, that's another big word with independent learners is that they're committed to their own learning. They're often committed to engaging with other people while they're learning. And so that's part of it. Yeah, they're brave. They're risk takers. Oftentimes they'll try something. They'll just jump in and try it. They're resourceful. That's another great word for independent learners, or another description, a characteristic is they're resourceful because they don't just, if something doesn't work, they'll see, what else can they do? What else can they find out? And or what else is here that I can use? And so resourceful, again, is a nice broad term for them. They're motivated. And as I said, motivated is a word that we'll talk about a lot tonight. They're invested in their own learning and they're invested in their self-growth and so forth. Yes, they are goal-oriented. Meredith said that they're goal-oriented, and that's definitely a characteristic of independent learners, that they have an idea of where they're going and they have an idea of how to get there. They're willing to ask questions, definitely, because that's a key part of being able to being able to be an independent learner. They're self-motivated. And again, that's that piece of motivation that's so important. They're confident. We've already talked about their type A's, which I chuckled about, but yeah, a lot of them are. They have initiative and they're problem solvers. And so again, this is another big piece of being an independent learner. They're responsible. So they're responsible for themselves. They're responsible for their own learning, but they're also responsible oftentimes for what's going on around them, so that they can, be sure that, things are going, the way that they need to go. Fearless, somebody else had said brave, and so fearless is a little stronger term about that. Self-directed, goal-oriented, we've had that. Responsibility, responsible, accountable, which I guess is like responsible. They're keen and enthusiastic. Yes, they often are. And sometimes independent learners can be quite enthusiastic about what they're working on at the moment. And so, that can be an important thing. They take ownership. Now, Meredith, this is an interesting term, academically trained. Yeah, because they have taken the initiative, they have taken, the steps, they've been motivated to learn how to do things. And so that's a very important stage, that they're engaged. And I'll read motivation. Okay, great. Curious. You just took the word right out of my mouth. And so these are all really great characteristics to describe independent learners. And so I have a list, and I'm going to kind of talk about them a bit. And curiosity, or being curious, is at the top of that list, because independent learners want to explore. They want to discover. They learn many ways, not just with traditional instruction, and they're proactive and finding out more. And so I think I have always been an independent learner. And so I can see this in myself, that I am curious about things. And so, I want to know about people. I want to know about things. I want to know about places. And I like to figure out, how can I learn more about this? And so curiosity is definitely a key characteristic. All of these are really important characteristics. And then we've talked about self-motivation. That has come up a couple of times. And when we think about motivation, they tend to be intrinsically motivated. They set their own goals, their own internal goals, and they're driven by their own personal achievement. And so an independent learner, they might appreciate that certificate, or they might appreciate that badge, but what they really want is to feel their own sense of accomplishment. They reflect, they engage in self-examination. And so they're able to evaluate themselves. They're able to think about what they've done. They're able to think about what are their strengths and what are their weaknesses, and how can they use them to improve their learning. And they often will chart their own accomplishments and failures. And so it's just definitely, Susan, it's reflective practice. And it's what, I don't know if you're familiar with Paulo Freire's work, but he talks about what he calls praxis. And so what he says is important is that teachers take an action, they reflect on it, and then they make changes to it, which is the practice piece. And so, independent learners have internalized that. They definitely do that. They think about what they're going to do and what they've done and how. But to me, one of the most interesting things about this, when I looked at several things to get these ideas. And this idea of charting their own accomplishments and failures, I thought was interesting, because I thought, I kind of do that. And I know people who do. And so, but I had not thought about that as being a piece of independent learning. And a couple of people have mentioned accountability. They take responsibility for their own acts and their performance. Another important piece of this is critical thinking. And so I'm sure that you guys have probably heard quite a bit about 21st century skills, and you know that critical thinking is a key part of that. And independent learners are able to do this. So they can examine, different possibilities, and they often can come up with multiple solutions based on real world observation and deduction. And so they don't just look for the simple answer. They'll look for, what else can I get from this? What else can we use this for? What else can we do? And then, let's see, I think somebody may have said something similar to this, is that they often can comprehend things with little or no instruction. I remember that when I first started teaching, the principal at my school was talking, I don't know, she was talking something about learners. You know how the administrator always has to, have this little talk at the beginning of the school year. But she was talking about, that there are a few kids that you could put them in a cave and bring them out in a week, and they would have learned all kinds of things. And she said, and then she was saying, but of course, most kids need more than that, and so, she was trying to talk about, meeting every child's needs. But yeah, there are people, and independent learners tend to be more like that, they can read something, they can visualize it, they can kinesthetically instruct themselves some way by doing a hands-on activity, and they often use trial and error. They're not afraid to make mistakes. And so and a couple of people mentioned being brave, and to me that's risk taking. And so they're not afraid to do that. And let's see, Susan popped up with creativity. Right, that's a big piece of it too, being creative. And so, it's just that kind of broad and deep way of thinking about things. Another characteristic, and the final one that's on my list, is persistence. And so they don't give up. They try to understand a concept as much as possible on their own, and then they'll ask for help. Or they'll realize that I'm not getting this. And so, or I'm missing something. And so that's another important piece of being an independent learner, is you generally understand the importance of teamwork. And so, which sounds kind of paradoxical, but if you think about it, it really makes sense that somebody who's an independent learner can also be a strong team player. And so, that's an important part of it too. And so, so they apply self-discipline and not just looking for the easy answer. They want to find a good answer to whatever problem they're working on. And when you think about your students, you think and strategies that are, as I said, I've been working a lot in recent months with us talking about 21st century skills, and problem solving is a big part of that. And so all of this comes together, working with students doing project-based learning. I just finished a little online course myself as a student that's offered through English language programs, which I'm part of, about it was called Eco PBL. It was focusing on how to integrate environmental education, or education about climate change, or education about waste reduction into the English language classroom. And so, this is, an important part too of creating independent learners, is giving them real life projects to work on. So you can help your students become more independent by encouraging all of these characteristics, the ones that you mentioned, and then the ones that I mentioned. Okay, Loretta, is there, or Melita,
That's
is there
great.
something you want to say?
That's amazing. I think we had our audience, our participants input. So maybe it's time to move on to our next question. Get deeper into this topic.
Something.
Yes, tell us.
Somebody just put one of my very favorite phrases up. And I'm not sure how to say your name, Hamar. Tolerance for ambiguity is key. And so thank you for adding that, because I had not thought about that in connection with this, but that tolerance for ambiguity is definitely an important thing. So thank you. Okay, Loretta,
That's a great
I'm done.
one. That's a
That's
great
good.
one. Thank you so much. A lot of information. I'm almost wondering, how do others perceive independent learners? It seems that they've got it all. They've got the package deal, correct?
Right.
Amazing. Yeah. Why is it important in English language learning?
Okay, so as we have said, motivation and curiosity play a large role in how effectively independent learners acquire language. And notice I used Krashen's word acquire, rather than learn, how they acquire language. They generally have developed a positive attitude toward the language and language learning in general. Curiosity and the motivation of independent learners is also related to persistence, as we've talked about. They persist until they have satisfied their curiosity or their needs. And so researchers who study the relationship between language learning and motivation have identified intrinsic motivation as being key for many successful learners. Intrinsic motivation is also a hallmark of independent learning, as we've already mentioned. So, for example, a common motivation for learning a language is to be able to communicate more effectively with your grandchildren who live in another country. Others may want to learn a second language because they want to acquire the cognitive and social advantages of being bilingual, or they want this for their children. And so, yeah, that's a piece of it. And this is different from having instrumental motivation, which is when a person wants to learn a language for practical reasons, such as an increase in salary or getting into university, that kind of thing. And so this kind of motivation is more closely related to extrinsic motivation, which research has shown to be a less powerful motivator for language learning, at least. So finally, some people are integratively motivated to learn a language. And so in other words, they feel an affinity for the language and the culture associated with the language. And so they want to get to know people who speak the language, and they want to be able to feel more a part of the culture because they have this affinity for it. I have some friends who lived in France for a year, and they both learned to speak French. And part of the reason, and they actually chose France. They took a year off and they chose to live in France because they had always enjoyed the French language and they enjoyed French culture, and so they wanted to immerse themselves in it, and they did. And so so that was their motivation for it, is just they wanted to just experience life. Maybe not as a French person in 1 year, but experience life, from that little different perspective. And those two friends are definitely independent learners if I've ever met any. But so you're going to find that these types of motivations often drive independent learners and therefore successful learners in your English classroom. Now, I want to, I see some things in the chat. Should I go ahead and address those?
May I just interject for a second, Lynn? Could you please mute your microphones? We seem to be hearing some background noise, and it's hard to make out what Lynn's saying. Thank you kindly. Please continue.
Yeah, it sounds like some squeaking. So not the question, but it's not whether independent learner have it all. Not necessarily, as sometimes they find, yes. And I think that's true of somebody mentioned type A. And so, yeah, it can lead to perfectionism and burnout. And so, the person who doesn't know, they don't know when to quit. And so, so it can be. It can be a problem, but with you, there's the teacher, you can help guide them. Okay, this is good. You're there, and just, help them to see that there are often limits to what they're doing. Because we have different types of language and age, background, language needs, skills, they have to be responsible for them, and that's the reason it's here. Okay, yeah, and so if you're particularly when you're in an ESL situation, in which you may have people from several different countries and different backgrounds and so forth, you are going to that does become even more important for them to be independent learners, so that they don't get lost in the class, or so they don't become unmotivated or demotivated. I'm not sure which is the better prefix there, but so that they stay, so they can stay motivated, because they are going to have to meet some of their own needs anyway, but especially in a classroom like that. Okay.
And this leads us to asking our members now. So why is it important for you? Why is having independent learning students in our ESL classes or English language classes? Why is that important? So we have Hasnawi El I'm sorry for mispronouncing your name. In that was the word Lynn was having issues with, and I'm having issues too now. Integrativeness.
Too many syllables.
Oh, yes. Entails having a positive attitude toward the second language, its culture, and the native speakers of the language, according to Taguchi et al. A positive attitude towards the language and its culture, as well as the native speakers. That's important. It should start from there, right, Lynn?
Yes, yeah, it definitely is. And I was just thinking about, I mean, I think a lot of independent learners of languages, and this is a different point than this, but I think a lot of people who are independent learners of languages are also what I call word nerds. Yeah, they love words. Yeah, and so they'll play with them, and they will, they'll hear something and they want to talk about it. And I confess I'm one of those. I have several friends, thank goodness, who are also word nerds, and I'll send them something that just to me is just so funny. And somebody who is not like that, I'm sure would say, what is this? What is this about? But yeah, I think that is part of it. It's a love for language is a piece of it, because a lot of people who are independent language learners study more than one language. Now, they may not be fluent in more than one language, but they definitely study more than one language.
Right.
Let's see, Harmony.
I would like to remind our audience that you're also welcome to use your microphone and your video on should you wish to participate live with us rather than type, though you're free to type in the chat box as well. Okay, so yes, Hasnawi is explaining that this is a motivation that comes from embracing the culture of the target language, right? It's not just about pragmatic gains, being pragmatic and looking at the practical side. I need English because I need to survive in Canada, right? Because I need a job, because I need to be successful in this new country. But it's also embracing everything the culture entails, right?
Oops.
And then Harmony is talking about a rewarding experience teaching online with a child who would say at the start of the session, she just wanted to chat. And so it didn't matter what the materials were. And so that those ended up being, more productive than if they had been following the lesson in the textbook, because the child knew what she wanted, that she wanted to talk. And so good for you for letting her do that instead of sticking to the program, because that is part of it. It does have to be organic. Independent learners need to know that what they're doing is organic, that's okay to go outside of the boundaries a bit, to go, or what is it we say about they go outside the box a bit.
And Meredith agrees. She's saying that I need my students to tell me what they need. Otherwise, I'm trying to offer one size fits all, which doesn't work, right?
Right.
Great point.
Yeah, and that's why it is so important, throughout the period of time you're working with students, is to do. I usually just do like an informal needs analysis, from time to time, trying to see, what is it they're needing now? What do we need to focus on now? Because the textbook says we should be doing present perfect continuous next. And, really? I mean, some of the students, they either already know it or they, it's just not relevant for them at this point. And and so as Homara is saying, we can't teach everything in the class, so they have to become independent learners. And so that is important, because as teachers, you can't meet every student's needs. I teach a course to some. Not all of the students are this way, but a lot of it, this course was designed for people who have never had an education course and who have never taught. And the idea is that they'll go abroad and teach English. And so we try to give them, something to work with. And that's what a lot of them are worried about, is that how can I meet the needs of, because, I do talk about that a lot, that, you've got to meet the needs of your students, but how can I meet the needs of all of my students? And so, we have to talk about that you're not going to meet the needs of all of your students, but this is where having your students become independent learners, they can start meeting their own needs. And then you're there to supplement and to guide them and to be sure that they're getting the things that you think they need, plus they're getting the things that they know they need. And so, yeah. So we've got, let's see, the importance of attitude motivation. Okay, some kind of a test battery link here. Okay, anything else?
Any other feedback? So why is it important for your own students? Anyone who would like to speak up and use your microphone? We would love to hear your voices as well. Anyone? I think we covered everything so far, maybe Lynn. So let's move on to the next.
We covered a lot.
We did cover a lot. So, okay. So
thanks everybody for sharing, because this really, this really makes it much easier when you do.
That's great. So let's move on to our conversation and discussion questions.
Okay. And let us begin then. What are the differences in how adult learners and younger learners develop independence?
Okay. And so as we were getting ready for this, I was told that most of you teach adults. And so you may or may not have had experience teaching younger learners, or, teens and younger learners. But I imagine that a lot of you probably have children and you have experienced young learners in a different way as a parent. And so I think all of us have been around children at one point or another. And I'm always very upfront with people. I don't do little kids. I don't teach younger children for a reason. I teach adults because I'm more comfortable with that. But then, of course, that was my training too. I was never taught how to teach younger children. And so I don't really quite know what to do. I know in theory, what to do, but as far as actually doing it, I'm not that. But so I work a lot. I work mostly with adults. And so I know that when I'm working with adults, they have a lot of prior knowledge and they have a lot of experiences to build on. And so these can improve their motivation to learn a language because they already have foundations for success. Maybe they've already studied and learned another language, or maybe they have a master's degree in mathematics, which to me is a total foreign language, and so they have this foundation to build on. And they also have this foundation we talked about risk taking. They have this foundation of taking risk, of knowing that you sometimes you just have to try things that it may not, you may not be quite sure how to do this. And so your role as a teacher, of course, then is to guide them to success in this experience so that they're not just going in all directions, but, helping them focus and helping them, if they're not confident, making mistakes, helping them through that. Children, on the other hand, are still acquiring experiences. I mean, people talk about children as a tabula rasa. I'm not so sure about that, but they seem to know an awful lot sometimes. But they're still acquiring experiences. And so the teacher may have to create more opportunities for them to develop curiosity and to develop their self-confidence. And children generally require more extrinsic motivations. And so that's why elementary teachers always have stickers, because little kids love that. And so that, they want that extrinsic motivation. I can remember when I was a kid, I took piano lessons for about a year, and the teacher would give oh gosh, I think a red star, a silver star, and a gold star. And I always wanted that gold star so badly, and I rarely got it. I was lucky to get a star at all. I was not talented that way. But kids are more extrinsically motivated that way. And so that's a thing to keep in mind. Although I have found that some adults really are. I was working with a group of educators recently, and we were talking about this idea of giving these little electronic badges. And one of the women in the group said, I love when I get those badges. She said, I know it sounds so stupid for an adult to say that, but she said, it always makes me feel so good. And I thought, okay, this is something that I need to keep in mind, because getting a badge doesn't mean anything to me. Fine, thank you. But everybody is different. And so she confessed that she really liked getting those badges. But to get away from that. But adult learners are generally more self-directed than young learners, especially adults who have been successful in previous learning experiences. They often have an idea of what they want, they have an idea of what they need, and so they can identify what is effective for their learning, and they can often make learning decisions on their own. And so that's an important piece of this, is that they can make decisions about their learning. And so when working with adults, the teacher needs to be there to more often with independent learners, more as a guide and not as, the sage on the stage, that they need this guidance. Adults also generally have better problem solving skills than young learners. Young learners are generally not developmentally ready for complex problem solving. And so they need to be given tasks that are less cognitively complex, because, developmentally, they're just not ready for things that an adult can do. They have, their cognitive skills are more concrete. They're not good abstract thinkers until, until 8 or 10 years old, some even older. But, I think it's kind of the area. Adults are also usually accustomed to working in teams at work, and they understand the value of collaboration and teamwork. And so while children enjoy working together, they need more guidance than an adult on how to work together effectively. However, I have found that even working with adults, if I expect them to, especially if I'm doing like a semester-long course, if I expect them to do group work, I always have a lesson about how to do group work, because there are some people that really just don't don't really get it. And so it's important, and it also kind of sets these boundaries for, when we do group work in this class, these are the expectations. And so, that can be an important part of providing those guidelines. There are several steps the language teacher can take to motivate and promote independence in all their learners. Carefully planned collaborative activities can be effective. So a strategy like using a jigsaw activity can promote deeper engagement with the material. And the classmates said that they develop intrinsic motivation to learn more, because I think that's the problem with some of the activities that we do in classes, and I do it too, is they're really not intrinsically motivating. They're not complex enough for adult learners. And so so that's, thinking about, how to do that. And then monitoring what the learners are doing and giving them value-added feedback. Not just praise, what I call praise feedback, but value-added feedback and encouragement helps learners develop reflective skills, which is a really important piece of being an independent learner. And so these, in turn, are key for developing as an independent learner. So what's in the chat that we need to look at?
Well, there's a lot in the chat, and that's great. Please keep those comments coming. Well, stickers were a favorite of college students too. That's what we learned. But yes, there's a lot of discussion. Mitra is saying that their maturity level plays a big role, and it's a huge difference when we compare adults to children and their goals and to what extent they are committed and responsible for their own learning, right? So that's absolutely a huge difference. Homaira is saying that their first language can be a barrier when it comes to adult learners. And that's such a great point indeed, because usually what happens is that they translate from L1 to L2, and that creates lots of problems, especially when it comes to grammar and sentence structure. We see that all the time.
Right.
Yes, Lynn.
And I think another part of that too is that depending on the situation, a lot of adults, they don't want to look stupid, which is, of course, the first thing that comes in their mind. A lot of people's minds is that, oh, if I say that, I'm going to sound so stupid. But again, that's where we try to help people. That mistakes are okay. That making a mistake is not the end of the world, and so it's important. And I think that's part of the adult learners' language barrier is they know that they can say anything they want to in their L1. And then here they are in the English classroom and they can't say the most basic thing. And so it can be sort of humiliating. I have lived, and Loretta knows me, and so she knows this. I've lived in several countries where I don't speak the language and haven't really tried to because I'm not going to be there long enough. And of course, I go as an English teacher or as an English teacher trainer. And so people want to speak English to me. And so I sometimes don't really have an opportunity. But there are times, I'm in a situation where I want to talk about something and I don't have the words. And so it can be really disconcerting because, as you see, my English is quite good and I can say almost anything I want to. And so, being in those situations sometimes, it can be trying and it can be stressful. And so that's another part of when we're working with adult learners, trying to help them be more independent will lower that stress level. It's going to lower that affective filter and help them with that part of being in an awkward situation.
And it matches up with what Harmony just wrote, that they might have lots of life experience and they might be experts in their own fields, but because of the difficulties they have in communicating those thoughts, they feel that they are in a lower position. And it says,
Right.
So sometimes society equates knowledge of English with overall intelligence, and that's a problem indeed. Okay, we also have another comment from Hasnai who says children acquire language, but adults learn, right? It refers back to the difference we made between acquisition and learning.
Right.
And Eliza is saying that it's their schemata that children are still developing. So adults have already achieved.
Look at a point that Harmony made too about it doesn't help that so much of broader society equates knowledge of English with overall intelligence. And so, that becomes very important because you may be talking to somebody whose English is rudimentary, but in their home country, they may have been a doctor or they may have been a lawyer. They may have been an engineer. And so you're right that society makes judgments about how people talk and how they sound. And one of my favorite things I've read recently was somebody made the comment that if someone mispronounces a word, it means that they read it somewhere. And
they learned it.
Right, they learned it through reading. And so I think that impacts a lot of people who are learning English. So they acquire, a good point, language distance, Yeah, and so that's another one of the the issues when you're especially teaching in an ESL situation is that you'll have people whose languages are similar to English, or maybe they've had experience with English in different ways. And then you have people that have a language that uses a different alphabet. The grammar is just totally different from English grammar. And so yeah, all of that plays into this. And so that's another another reason why helping them become independent learners can help. So new are more and more autonomous, going to do right. Yeah. So teachers are no longer the sole source of knowledge. And so that's why I often call teachers facilitators, because
Yes.
they're guides, they're facilitators now more than being the expert. And so
and Harmony is
my
also
line of-
sharing medical students that they're perfect when it comes to professional language and medical terminology, but then sentence structure, subject verb agreement, right?
right.
Yes.
Right.
Great
Yeah,
example.
I would rather my doctor know what something's called and be able to say it than say it grammatically
correct.
Yeah, I want them to know that's my kidney. So yeah,
Perfect.
that's a good point there. But yeah, and so again, that comes back to that need to know. And so a medical a student or somebody who's learning English in the medical field, they need to focus on what's important for them.
Okay, good. So Melita, let's move on to our next question.
Okay. What are the differences in independent learners in the F2F, face-to-face, and the online environment?
Okay. So one reason why I included this is because I've been doing this a lot. For years, I taught face-to-face only. And in recent years, I have been teaching more and more online. And they are different. If you have not taught online yet, you will find that you cannot take a face-to-face class and just pop it into the online environment. You've got to think about it. And so regardless of the learning context, independent or autonomous learners take full responsibility for their own learning. In an online learning environment, the skill of independent learning is very helpful. And so there are several factors, whether face-to-face or online, that have been shown to be effective motivators and important factors in developing as an independent learner. And so from the teacher's side, clear student-centered learning outcomes. And so whether it's a face-to-face or an online course, that will help your students become more independent learners. Clear expectations and instructions. Now, this is always tricky in the online environment because if you're face-to-face and you give instructions and students are sitting there just looking at you, or they're turning and talking to their neighbor, you can step in and you can explain it a different way, or you can model it. But in the online environment, you don't have that luxury. You have to write really, really clear instructions, and it's very tricky. And so that's so that's one of the things that I have found as being, to me, one of the most difficult parts of creating an online lesson is being sure that my instructions are crystal clear, and telling the students, if you don't understand, get in touch with me, because then I'll try to re-explain it. And so whether face-to-face or online, there needs to be space for the students to build relationships with one another and with the instructor. It's not as easy in an online course. You have discussion boards, or maybe you have live sessions. And I have found that having a synchronous part to an online course is key to building those relationships, because you see one another, you talk to one another, you hear one another's voices, you have a slightly more organic discussion. Not like you can in a face-to-face, but that does help. And then just helping students see how they can connect with other students. One of the things I try to do when I give feedback on discussion boards, I'll say, Loretta, did you see what Melita wrote about this? What did you think about her ideas? And so I try to encourage them to look at what other people are writing. And so not just what what they're writing, because it's oftentimes, so often what happens on a discussion board is a student posts and they don't really care what other people have written. And so, and of course, that's an important part of the learning. And so I do try to encourage a little bit more interaction. And then, of course, it's important to monitor what they're doing and give them feedback and encouragement. And as I said, not just praise feedback, not just good job, but I really like how you express that idea. That's just, and giving them, maybe, have you thought about asking them some questions? Have you thought about it from this angle? And then, of course, it's important in both online and face-to-face to use a variety of strategies. If you use the same strategy every time, if your course has, in the online portion, has a video or a text, they do a discussion board, and then they do a quiz, you're not mixing it up enough. And so you need to think about that. And one of the things that I have learned in the last couple of years with this project I've been working on is the importance of pulling things from outside. Use Padlet, have them link to Padlet and have them use Padlet, have them link to Jamboard and use that, or in a live session, have them do something, do a poll everywhere. And so, those kinds of things can help make it more engaging. So the final point is important in building independent learners, because if students only experience one way of learning, they may not realize there's more than one approach to engaging with language learning and solving problems in general.
Great.
Looks
Yes.
like we've got some.
If we could get some feedback, that would be great. So how did you experience moving from face-to-face to online? I'm sure many of you, almost all of us,
In the last few years,
in the last few years have been teaching online. So what did you do? Harmony is saying that, yes, the tip of encouraging students to respond to other students' comments is a good one. Well, I use that in every discussion board. For example, I tell my students to reply to at least 2 other students, which means that they have to read what others have, at least 2 other students, what they have read, and interact with them and build connections. I always tell them this is the only opportunity you have to build connections. You have to create your own network. You're not face-to-face. This is your team. So build those relationships, and discussion boards are a great way to get started. Create a community, a sense of community online.
Yeah.
Good. Any other feedback?
I would really love for somebody to talk if they have what they've experienced taking a face-to-face course to online. I would like to hear your experience about that. If somebody would like to talk about one.
Yes, please. Anyone who would like to share their experience and what they feel, what differences they experienced, and well, if they also have a choice, if they have a preference now. I'm teaching face-to-face and online at the same time. I feel that face-to-face is the best choice, though online has its own benefits. So I'm glad I'm doing both, actually. It's hard for me to decide.
I like doing hybrid classes where you can have the more, I don't know, intense discussions and so forth face to face, and then have them do sort of the, do the reading and do the, the more mundane tasks. Doing a little bit of research or whatever, and then I guess kind of like the flipped classroom idea of I like doing a hybrid. See, okay, it seems to take more boldness for students to engage in the online environment. Sandra, is that why you're not talking while you're typing? Many find it more intimidating, and I think they do, because it is, you actually have to take an action. And so I have this one online course that I teach. When we do our live session, I call on people and I tell them, if nobody answers, I'm calling on somebody, so be prepared. And so, which is usually a fairly small group, so it's not that difficult.
I find that sending our students in breakout rooms from time to time helps. make them more active and engaged, because in a
Right.
smaller group, they'll feel less intimidated. Mhm.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good idea. I'm glad you brought that up because, yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's really interesting when I go and listen to them in the breakout rooms and they are all active and talking to each other. I'm like, oh, okay, so you can do this.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's nice. Good.
But it's the same in face-to-face though. You'll get much more discussion in a small group with most groups of students. If
Exactly,
they turn on the
Mitra.
videos, then it's not dark room. Oh,
Yes.
yeah, Mitra points out not dark rooms, but just actually
No.
try to interact with one another.
That happens too. Yes.
Everything does.
Okay. But this is the reality. It is the reality for sure.
Mhm.
It does happen. It happens that you send them into breakout rooms and there is nobody talking, right? When you step in, you're
Yeah.
like, okay, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Homara is saying that in face-to-face learning, students learn during the break times too. Mhm.
Uh-huh.
Oh,
Good
yeah,
point.
definitely.
Yeah, good point.
Great point.
Yeah. Very
There's
good
more
point.
independent learning in face-to-face,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
More
Yeah.
connections being built. Excellent. Great. So let's move on to our next discussion question
Let's
for
go forward.
tonight. Perfect.
In your context, what do your learners need the most to become independent?
Okay. And so I did a little bit of checking on things about this because I thought I was just trying to think, how would we handle this question the best? And Dernier, which I don't know if you're familiar with him, and I may be mispronouncing his name, because I believe he's Hungarian, unfortunately is no longer with us. I was very sad to see that because I think that he really has offered some very interesting insights into English language learning. But he and his colleagues recently, sometime before this year, carried out some classroom research. And they found that learners who can construct ideal self-images as successful second language learners are better able to reach their goals. And so if they can see themselves doing this, that they are more successful. And so it kind of reminds me of a totally different situation. One summer for a couple of months, I took golf lessons. I tried to learn to play golf. And that's what the teacher kept telling me. He said, you have to visualize that ball going over the water. Well, my brain looked at that water and visualized my ball going into it, and it always did. I couldn't do it. But yeah, and I was and I think a lot of people who play sports, I think that they really get this, is that you've got to visualize whatever it is. If you're throwing a free throw in basketball, you visualize it going in and it's going to go in. I saw Michael Jordan one time on a thing on TV stand with a blindfold and hit, I don't know, 8 out of 10 free throws, and he couldn't even see the basket. And so we need to think about that, how we can do that with our language learners, is how can we help them see themselves as successful language learners. And then some characteristics of a teacher who promotes independence is you expect your students to succeed. You walk into the classroom knowing that they're going to be able to do whatever it is that the language objective is for the day. They'll be able to do it, and that they'll be able to do it tomorrow too. And so, I think sometimes that we just kind of think, oh God, I'm going to teach us again. But, we do. I mean, we have to keep that in mind, that, that we do have to recycle things, but just knowing that they can succeed. And then prepare them in advance, or prepare them to advance. And so think about, how you can structure what they're working on, how you can guide them so that they do move from one step to the next and they're not stuck in that one place all the time. So like I know that one of the things that I think a lot of kind of high beginner, low intermediate students get stuck at a plateau. And so they're a little reluctant. They'll use the simple past, but they really don't like to try to use the present perfect because they always get it wrong. And so they'll talk about something generally using present simple, past simple, and future. And so, encouraging them and helping them see that go ahead and give it a try. Try using the present perfect here. Try using something else. And so, and then as I've said several times, mistakes are okay. My classroom is a safe place. Nobody's going to yell at you if you make a mistake. Just so go ahead and try it and do it. Now, I'm one of those learners that, oh gosh, I hate to make mistakes, but I finally, when I'm studying a language, I do finally reach this point that it's just kind of, I've got to talk. So, whatever comes out, I hope they understand me. And then again, vary the teaching style and vary the strategy so that every day is not the same, so that they are doing, different things different ways. Because, as you know, different people learn differently. And so you want to be sure that you hit on all of those. So that's all I have to say about that. So what are some of the people in the chat saying about their context?
I would really love to hear some of these people share their thoughts with us, and not type them only, but I'd love to hear you. So lots of ideas. Thank you so much for making the effort of typing all of this in here. Lynn, would you like to take over?
Yeah, this point about the zone of proximal development is a good one, about involving more capable peers with less capable. Yeah, mix your groups up. Don't always have, the same people working together. I know that especially when you're working with teens, they often want to work only with their best friend. And, trying to arrange things that so they're comfortable working with other people. And so, that's very important. That, and then somebody's not teaching but teaching job, blah blah blah, writing. I'll tell you, so you may think some people are not so good about ballet music. There are a few prodigies, but they're mostly. One of the things that I do as a freelancer is I do online tutoring for a writing center, and so I think a lot of people just I just can't do this. So well, come on, you can do it. And so, and so that's a big part of what I do in a tutoring session, is not with everybody, but with some people, is that, they just, they can't write and they don't understand the instructions. And I'll tell you, that's one of the biggest issues with a lot of the students I work with, is the instructor has not given clear instructions. And so we end up spending 5 minutes or so trying to figure out what exactly it is they're supposed to do. And so that's clear instructions are key. But yeah, giving them that encouragement is really key. Work on some of their personality traits. Okay, yeah. And so part of this does have to be with your personality. A learning environment that's pleasant, fun, and same time providing them various opportunities, right? Yeah. And so, it needs to be engaging, because otherwise it's, it's boring. Sound like a high school student. Oh, Harmony has a hand up. Yay.
Yes, Harmony,
Yay.
Please. Yes.
We'll give you a star for the night.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to clarify what I was saying there with the practice bit. It's because all of those students, they are musicians, they're singers, they're pianists, they're violinists, right? So I told them, you got here by practicing your instrument. Writing's the same. It's just a skill like any other. And so that's what I try to do in the classroom. I tell them, you're just here to practice. You don't have to just jump right in and be good at it. That's not the point.
Yes. Very
And
nice.
it's just, it's the mind game, really. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. I like that.
Yes, very nice. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Personality.
Anyone else who would like to share their ideas? Democratic teaching, inclusive and welcoming learning environment. So these are words we have repeated so much today, but they are so important We need to
Mhm.
allow our students to make mistakes, and that's how they will try out, right? That's how they will
Mhm.
experience and experiment with their new
Mhm.
language, with their new
Well,
environment.
and I love the idea of what Harmony said about it's practice. It's about practice. And
Yes.
so you don't become better at playing the violin without practicing.
Playing
So
without playing it.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So good.
Good. Okay, we have one more discussion question and then we'll move on. Yes, Meredith, please.
Oh, another voice.
Yes.
Woohoo!
Hi,
So we'll
everyone.
give you a sticker too.
Uh-huh.
I'm just thinking now, I have one of the biggest challenges I have in my CLB 7-8 class right now is I have a student with a lot of fossilized language patterns. So a lot of like we thinking instead of we are thinking. And I've tried some creative strategies to have her work on her own at sort of chipping through these fossilized pieces. Because I don't feel that the whole group really needs to look at these language patterns. But at this point, I'm just really feeling that if she doesn't become a more independent learner and really take this
Right.
on for herself, I don't know how much I can do.
Right. Yeah, and that is tough. And I think part of that, not always, but I think part of it with some students is they don't have the knack for language somehow. And so trying to get past that can be difficult, because I mean I've known people that have maybe have lived in the US forever, and they will still say, let's see if I can say it, I'm going to do that.
Yes.
Whereas and things, and then I think that what happens in the classroom is different, but in life, people don't correct you after you reach a certain point. As long as they understand what you're saying, they're not going to
Yes.
correct you. And so maybe some focused correction, which it sounds like you're trying to do. Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
tough one.
Yeah, thank you. And also, she is understandable, fully understandable. So then I think it also becomes about their goals. Does she
Right.
need it to be a refined?
Right.
Thank you.
Well, and maybe you could talk to her about setting some goals. That in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to work on whatever this is. I'm going to practice saying I'm gonna instead of I'm gonna to.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So, or just something small, because I think a lot of times that's people try, and I'm not saying you, the teacher, but I'm saying just people in general try to fix everything. And so I think that, maybe just taking little pieces and saying that, this is, work on this one little piece instead of trying to have her work on everything. Because, when things are fossilized, that's just, it's
tough one.
tough.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Speaking of tough, here we go. Next question. How can you provide motivational information as well as motivational and challenging real world tasks that spark their curiosity? I love that. And promote reflection.
Okay, so again, we go back to something that Dornier wrote, that the students need to have a clear roadmap of tasks and strategies to follow in order to be successful and consequently become independent learners. And so, you can't just turn them loose. You do have to provide them, with a roadmap, and you do have to provide them with guidance. And so you and the students need to have a language learning plan. And, Meredith, with that student, that may be something that might work with her, is to have as I said, a kind of a set plan. So the teacher can help them do this by helping them set learning goals. And so their goal should build on what they already know and their interests. And so effective goals help them visualize success. And I think that is kind of part of what what happens, especially when we're talking about public education, like K to 12 education, is you've got a curriculum and you're supposed to follow it. And sometimes that just doesn't fit everybody. And so by having the students think about, what is it, and especially working with adults, what is it I need to learn? And then you're helping them figure out how to get there. And so that can be useful. And then help them make language learning a habit by providing motivational information and tasks. And so this includes information that is relevant to their own lives, to their interests and their needs. And so an example from my teaching was my first experience teaching. I had 10 weeks of teacher training, and that was it. And I went to Poland to teach English to high school students. Well, luckily, this was back when English was new. And so not all of the students, because they were high school students, but a lot of the students were excited about being able to learn English, which was wonderful. But I had one student who was a senior in a class of seniors, because they do divide them by grades, whether not by ability, but by grade. And so he would sleep through class almost every time. And so I would call on him and he had no idea. Well, one day I brought in a song and I incorporated a song. I wanted to teach some grammar point or something. He perked up and he sat and he participated. And I found out later he was a musician. And so I thought, okay, so yeah, this to me that was his interest. That motivated him, being able to and he participated in class for the rest of the semester because of that, because I think he kept waiting for more music. And so I did introduce more music because I like music too. And so I found it effective. And so, we do have to think about that, what is, so what is relevant? And so challenging real world tasks are motivating. They spark students' curiosity and they learn and they build their self-confidence as they complete the task. And so they learn to take responsibility for their learning. And so that it promotes independence, such as good communication skills, critical thinking skills, and leadership skills. And so finally, to build independent learners, teach them to reflect on their language learning by providing opportunities for reflection. And that way you and they can take inventory of what's working and where do they need improvement. Because I think that's a point that's often missed. Okay, Loretta, I'm done.
I love the reflection piece, really.
Yeah.
Because we hurry so much to cover everything that we don't have time to stop. So finding that time as teachers ourselves, and then teaching our students how to stop and reflect and analyze and self-assess and self-evaluate their own learning and their own growth is such an important point.
Certainly is.
Formative assessment for or as or while they develop.
Right.
Dr. Jana Fox. Summative assessment and diagnostic testing to address the fluctuating needs. The lack.
So it all sounds easy, doesn't it?
In theory, right? It does, but it is hard, right? So providing that information, and I love the real world tasks here because they will motivate our students, knowing the needs they have. But the challenge is that in most of our linked classes, students come from so many different backgrounds and they have so many different needs, and it's hard to manage them all, right? But if we get that information firsthand, this will create a better picture in front of us. It's easier when you're teaching, like I'm teaching engineering students now, and I know their needs, right? Even though they're coming from chemical engineering, electrical, mechanical, still the needs are similar. Task-based learning, absolutely.
Yeah, project-based learning, task-based learning.
Shadi is saying to motivate my international students to engage in speaking activities or group tasks is selecting topics about their culture back home that motivates them, or what they feel most proud of about themselves and about their country and culture. We start from our students, right? Yeah. From what they love and what they are able to talk about, information the students are interested and will naturally be motivational.
Right.
Starting from them. So not teaching what we want to teach, but teaching what they want to learn. That's a great beginning. And then we can move on and fit in whatever we need to teach them, right? Gradually, organically.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's great. It's 8:11 and it's actually now time to go into our breakout rooms and discuss the following question. What will your biggest challenge or challenges be in fostering independent learning in your own context? So that's the question we have for you. We'll leave it here now and I'll divide you into breakout rooms. Here we are back again, and there are so many videos on. See, I knew that
great.
already.
Nice to see you.
That's what always
nice
happens.
to see you.
Nice to
Hi,
see you.
Mitra. It's nice to see you.
Okay. We apologize because we know that breakout rooms are never enough. The time we have in breakout rooms is never enough, but this session, TESL Dialogue, is always 90 minutes long, so we have to schedule that time. So let's start with room 1. I would like one representative from room 1 to share what you discussed and the challenges that you talked about in your room. So we had Harmony, Helen, Shanika, and Taylin. Apologies for mispronunciation. Anyone who would like to take the floor from room 1? So we had Harmony, Helen, Shanika, and Taylin. Anyone who would like to share? You could unmute yourself. Yes, Harmony. Okay.
So what we talked about is we heard a lot, especially from Taylor and Helen. So in both cases, they've had very distinct issues. So I think in Taylor's case, it's that some students would already be very eager, be very independent, but others would, they're there just because they have to, because it's part of their job, because it's right. And it's that group that's sometimes really hard to motivate. And Helen was saying that depending on the student's sort of original cultural background, they might just have it, they might come from a very sort of teacher-centric context where, what the teacher says goes. And so they're used to actually more of that sort of teacher-focused learning as opposed to student-focused learning, if that makes sense.
Right.
So those
exactly.
Yeah, so we considered the idea of using, again, the sort of breakout group, small groups to sort of get them to just talk with each other and not just to the instructor. Yeah,
that's great.
Great point.
It's the motivation and it's the feeling that I can do this on my own, right? Perfect. Thank you so much, room 1. Anything else from room 1 that you would like to add before we move on? No? Anyone? Okay. Let's move on to room 2 then. We have Arla, Arthur, Meredith, Susan, and Zahid. Anyone from room 2 that would like to summarize what you discussed in your room? Good. Arla, Arthur, Meredith, Susan, and Zahid. Anyone?
Okay, I can do it. This is Meredith.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
It was really, really great to get to talk to other people, especially in diverse programs. So Arthur was sharing his challenge of, I hope I'm doing you justice here, Arthur, working with students who are primarily working in French language, and English is a required course for them, but not necessarily something they're super motivated to be doing or have the energy for. So that's a really different challenge than those of us that are working in Link or ESL programs. And then Zahid, with Zahid, we were also discussing the challenge of students finding real world opportunities to use their language. So this idea that we are the world of English for a lot of them, and what repercussions that might have.
Right.
Interesting points. Thank you so much, Meredith. That's great. Thank you. Thank you to room 2. Let's move on to room 3. We have Gabriana, Hasnawi, Kathleen, and Shadi. Anyone from room 3?
Yep, I got voted.
Perfect. Okay.
Hey,
You're
way to go.
volunteering.
We love that.
Well, one of the things, like, especially with teaching online, you know, being able to make sure that you have the inclusive classroom so that the students are encouraged to participate and to really to try and you know, even if they make mistakes, it doesn't really matter. But also one of the things that that I've been playing with is we use D2L at the college, and I know D2L has badges, and so I've been looking at using those because I try to do a flipped classroom, and if they can get away without reading, they do. So, you know, so you know, I'm thinking of throwing in badges to get them to look at the
Motivated.
PowerPoint slides and stuff and motivate them that way. So we'll see if it works.
Good luck with that.
Fabulous.
Any other challenges you discussed in your room?
No, that was about it.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. That's great. Great tip. Let's move on to room 4. We had Ala, Homaira, Kelly, Mitra, and Sandra. Do we have any volunteers?
This is Sandra. I'll speak. It was only Mitra and I for a while there, and I think the other ones didn't really get a chance to speak except for the last few seconds, and now I don't even remember what was discussed. Sorry. Short-term memory, I don't know. But Mitra and I had a chance to chat a bit, and Mitra teaches at the college level. I don't currently teach ESL, but I do work in an elementary school with grade 7 and 8 students, just in the English situation. But Mitra was saying that she is finding it challenging to motivate and engage the students. They're all distracted by their phones, or they're just chit-chatting with their buddy next to them. And it seems to be worsened since the pandemic, and just having to go back and forth with an online platform or an in-person platform. And so just getting the buy-in from students has been a challenge. And working in an elementary school, not in an ESL situation, the phones are a horrible distraction. And as many times as we try to put rules around, it's just not working when you get their mom and dad texting them in the middle of the day or calling them. So just trying to keep their attention and keep them focused is one of the biggest challenges, just I think, in education right now, whether it's children or adults, keeping people engaged and buying in that what they do matters. So I think I'm getting all the info that we discussed. So that
Thank you, Mitra,
you.
Sandra, and room 4. Good points indeed. There's some burnout with online. That's what Susan is sharing, and that's true. Let's move on to our last but not the least room. Carol, Delroy, and Eliza. Anyone from room 5? Your challenges, if you could share the challenges you discussed in room 5. Anyone? Yes? Yes, Eliza, sorry.
Hi, everyone. Thank you. This is Eliza.
Eliza,
Yes.
perfect.
Eliza.
Thank you. So we had a very brilliant discussion, actually. Deroy shared some words of wisdom that, like, we need to make students have the find the meaning, and they can literally feel the meaning of the classroom and have fun in the classroom. So that's very important. And also he mentioned we shouldn't rely too much on technology and digital world. But I feel it's really hard for teachers and students these days to rely not too much on technology, especially during pandemic. And for me, I'm currently running my own language school, and all of my classes are online. So my life and my teaching depend on it. So yes, but for now, I'm really trying to cultivate independent learners. I'm trying to give my students, help them feel their social presence in the classroom. help them to discover the meaning of learning, not just to learn the knowledge, but to discover how to learn and also the meaning and the outcome of learning. So I think these are very important in shaping our learners to be independent learners. But I do have a concern. So one of my students, he is my one-on-one student. He has ADHD and it's very, very hard for him to concentrate on the learning. No matter, I really tried a lot. For instance, he's really into football. So I use football reading materials to teach him grammar and engage him in reading and thinking and critical thinking and etc. He can focus for a while, but it's really hard for him to constantly focus on the class. So I really hope to get some suggestions and ideas and insights from our community. Thank you.
Well, Retta, that sounds like another dialogue topic.
Oh, it does.
It certainly does.
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
That's a really important topic, and we'll definitely think about it. Susan, you have your hand up. Thank you, Eliza, for sharing your concern.
Yeah, I just wanted to pipe in that I think especially when there are, I mean, every class in a sense is going to be a multi-level class. So I was just thinking about the zone of proximal development and just really making sure that the challenge is enough to be challenging, but not too much to cause people to shut down.
Right.
Just trying to find that sweet spot.
So
Thank
I
you.
+1, right? Not too high. And then combining students that will not take over and make the other students feel overwhelmed. Great point, Susan. Thank you so much. And here we're showing Dr. Lynn Zimmerman's details. Thank you so much, Lynn, for the session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Well, I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody, for attending our session tonight.